Okay, so we're going to release the word of the Lord over you. Sarah's going to come up and start. Dimitri, you're up next. Go ahead, yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Now there in the citadel of Susa, a Jew of the tribe of Benjamin named Mordecai,
Hoorah!
son of Jair, the son of Shemel, the son of Kish, who had been carried into exile from Jerusalem by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, among those taken captive with Jehoiachin, king of Judah. Mordecai
Hoorah!
had a cousin named Hadassah, whom he had brought up because she had neither father nor mother.
No, Hadassah, not Esther.
The young woman, who was known as Esther, had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Mordecai
Hoorah!
had taken her as his own daughter when her father and mother died. When the king's order and edict had been proclaimed, many young women were brought to the citadel of Susa and put under the hair of Haggai. Esther also was taken to the king's palace and entrusted to Haggai, who had charge of the harem. She pleased him and won his favor. Immediately he provided her with beauty treatments and special food. He assigned to her 7 female attendants selected from the king's palace and moved her and her attendants into the best place in the harem. Esther had not revealed her nationality and family background because Mordecai had forbidden her to do so. Every day he walked back and forth near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was and what was happening to her. When the turn came for Esther, the young woman Mordecai had adopted, the daughter of his uncle Abihail, to go to the king, she asked for nothing other than what Haggai, the king's eunuch, who was in charge of the harem, suggested. And Esther won favor of everyone who she saw. She was taken to King Xerxes in the royal residence in the 10th month of Tebet, in the 7th year of his reign. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet. Esther's banquet. For all, for all his noble families and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, but Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do. So she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions, as she had done when he was bringing her up. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the 2 officials were impaled with poles. All of this was recorded in the book of the annals presence of the king.
All right, yeah. Dimitri, okay. You guys still okay on the names? Yeah. Okay, you haven't run into Haman yet, so
we're ready for some history.
I'm waiting for the air to go out of the room.
Okay, chapter 3. After these events, King Xerxes honored Haman.
You like boo? You like boo better? Boo, okay. Boo or hiss, either way, your choice. Okay.
Right. So, yeah, we'll practice that again. After after these events, King Xerxes honored Haman.
Boo!
Son of Hamad, the Agagite, elevating him and giving him a seat of honor higher than that of all the other nobles. All the royal officials at the king's gate knelt down and paid honor to Haman.
Boo!
For the king had commanded this concerning him, but Mordecai
would
not kneel down or pay him honor. Then the royal officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai,
Hoorah!
"Why do you disobey the king's command?" Day after day they spoke to him, but he refused to comply. Therefore they told Haman about it to see whether Mordecai's
Hoorah!
behavior would be tolerated, for he had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai
Hoorah!
would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai
Hoorah!
people were, he scorned the ideal of killing only Mordecai.
Hoorah!
Instead, Haman.
You guys are too long on that. You got to make it more tight here. Ooh, I got to.
Look for a way to destroy all Mordecai's
Hoorah!
people, the Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. In the 12th year of King Xerxes, in the first month, the month of Nisan, the pure, that is, the lot, was cast in the presence of Haman to select the day and month, and the lot fell on the 12th month, the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Xerxes, "There are certain people dispersed among the peoples in all the province of your kingdom who keep themselves separate. Their customs are different from those of all other people, and they do not obey the king's laws. It is not in the king's best interest to tolerate them. If it yet pleases the king, let a decree be issued to destroy them. And I will give 10,000 talents of silver to the king's administrators for the royal treasury." So the king took his signet ring from his finger and gave it to Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews. "Keep the money," the king said to Haman, and do with the people as you please. Then on the 13th day of the first month, the royal secretaries were summoned. They wrote out in the script of each province and in the language of each people all Haman. Orders to the king's satraps, the governors of the various provinces, and the nobles of various peoples. These were written in the name of King Xerxes himself and sealed with his own rings. Dispatches were sent by carriers to all the king's province with the order to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, young and old, women and children, on a single day, the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, to plunder their goods. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so they would be ready for that day. The carriers went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. The king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was bewildered.
Hey. Good, Laura?
They don't like Haman, I don't think.
You know, right? If you're at a standard Jewish setting, they'd actually have noisemakers, these loud racket things that they every time his name comes up. So you're not supposed to be able to hardly hear his name. Okay, go ahead.
Chapter 4. When Mordecai learned of all that had been done, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. But he went only as far as the king's gate, because no one clothed in sackcloth was allowed to enter it. In every province to which the edict and order of king came, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing. Many lay in sackcloth and ashes. When Esther, eunuchs, and female attendants came and told her about Mordecai, she was in great distress. She sent clothes for him to put on instead of his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther summoned Hatak, one of the king's eunuchs assigned to attend her and ordered him to find out what was troubling Mordecai.
Hoorah!
So Hatak went out to Mordecai
Hoorah!
in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. Mordecai
Hoorah!
told him everything that had happened to him, including the exact amount of money Haman had promised to pay into the royal treasury for the destruction of the Jews. He also gave him a copy of the text of the edict for their annihilation, which had been published in Susa, to show to Esther, and explain it to her, and told him to instruct her to go into the king's presence to beg for mercy and plead with him for her people. Hatak went back and reported to Esther what Mordecai had said. Then she instructed him to say to Mordecai, all the king's officials and the people of the royal province know that for any man or woman who approaches the king in the inner court without being summoned, the king has but one law: they be put to death, unless the king extends the gold scepter to them and spares their lives. But 30 days have passed since I was called to go to the king. When Esther words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer: do not think that because you are in the king's house, king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: go gather together all the Jews who are in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all Esther's instructions.
All right. Yeah. No, everybody had one sheet from me pretty much.
On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting in his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her, and he held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Then the king asked, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be given you. If it pleases the king, replied Esther, let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him. Bring Haman at once, the king said, so that we may do what Esther asks. So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, what now is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom it will be granted. Esther replied, my petition and my request is this: if the king regards me with favor, or if it pleases the king to grant my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's question. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai.
Hoorah!
Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave. And she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, have a pole set up, reaching to the height of 75 feet, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. This suggestion delighted Haman. And he had the pole set up.
Yay. Hey. We got...
We love you,
So I don't know if I can beat Miss Cheryl's voices.
that's hard to follow.
Actually, I was talking to my dad before this if I could have a little fun, and I love having a little fun.
Yeah.
One thing I love doing are accents and impressions of guys. And I couldn't quite figure out what to do, if I could do a Captain Jack Sparrow, or if I could do a Sean Connery, or kind of a Russian to the Russian. Anyway, so we'll just kind of wing it and see how it goes. Yes, we're just going to have a little bit of fun with seeing how this goes. That night, the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found reported there that Mordecai had exposed Bigatha and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had considered to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. The king said, who's in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on a pole that he had set up for him. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked, what should be done for the king that delights, for the man the king delights to honor? Now Haman thought to himself, I think he'll like this voice, who is there that the king would rather honor more than me? So, it's about to get worse, so just letting you know. So he answered the king. For a man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn and a horse the king has ridden. One with a royal crest placed upon its head. Then, that the robe and horse be entrusted to the one the king's most noble princess. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on a horse through the city street. It's not that funny, seriously. You have to calm down. Calm down. You have to take this here and put it down here. Calm. Proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.
that it? Oh, good.
It's okay, I'll be here all week, don't worry. Or most of it anyway. Go at once, the king commanded Haman. Nothing so hard, I forgot what to do. Get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended. So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is too far. This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. It is not a place for laughter. I know my voice is just so adorable you can't stand it. Like a tiny grain of glucose, yeah. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall... Sorry, I forgot to pause. Since Mordecai, one more time. Before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. While they were still talking to him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. Okay. Thank you very much for your wonderful time.
Who was that he was riding on again?
The horse. Very adorable horse. It's very cute and it's so precious. And you could not stand it. Thank you. Now, the lovely Martha.
So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine...
As they were drinking wine?
I'm waiting for awe or something.
Well, no, they're...
Thank you, Kim. As they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked Queen Esther...
You're pausing before, you're supposed to pause afterwards.
Queen Esther.
Okay, who brought the wine she got in there? I didn't know we have any wine tonight. She got some. Okay.
She got a glass. You thought that was just So the king, anyway, asked her. What is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he, the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said, an adversary, an enemy. This vile man, Haman. Then Haman
I don't know what that was, but it got out of the cage somewhere.
A cage Then this man, Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage. He left his wine.
Oh, yeah.
And he went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden to the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house?"
Kingsman.
While she's in the house with me, did I get it? So he's mad, all right? He's mad because the dude's on the couch with his wife. As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A pole reaching to a height of 75 feet stands by Haman's house. He had set it up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Impale him on it." So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided.
Huh? Yeah. You're 8. Right? You're 8?
That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king. For Esther told how he was related to him. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favor and thinks it is the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches of Haman, the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai, the Jew, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have impaled him on the pole he set up. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked." At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan. They wrote out Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai
Hoorah!
wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses especially bred for the king. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed army of any nationality or province who might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa.
All right. And now for something completely different.
This ought to be easy, guys. This guy right here. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold and white and purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and every city to which the edict of the king came, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebration. And many people of the other nationalities became Jews because the fear of the Jews had seized them. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities in all the provinces of King Xerxes to attack those determined to destroy them. No one could stand against them because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. And all the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews because fear of Mordecai had seized them. Mordecai was prominent in the palace. His reputation spread throughout the provinces, and he became more and more powerful. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also assembled to protect themselves and get relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but did not lay their hands on the plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and 14th, and then on the 15th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. This is why rural Jews, those living in villages, observe the 14th of the month of Adar as a day of joy and feasting, a day for giving presents to each other. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews throughout the provinces of King Xerxes, near and far, to have them celebrate annually the 14th and 15th days of the month of Adar as the time when the Jews got relief from their enemies, and as the month when their sorrow was turned to joy, into their mourning into a day of celebration. He wrote them to observe the days as days of feasting and joy, and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor.
All right.